So today we will make our best attempt to overview the lab on the respiratory system. As you know, we need to breathe. Breathing is essential for burning glucose, the process in which energy that is derived from burning oxidizing glucose is used to produce ATP, the ultimate energy currency of the cells. And another important role of respiratory system is to maintain proper pH in the blood. Carbon dioxide that is produced during respiration diffuses in the blood where it forms carbonic acid. Carbonic acid dissociates into hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ion, thus establishing what is called bicarbonate buffer. So this is the general anatomy of the respiratory system, all the way up to trachea, larynx, esophagus, larynx, pharynx, and nasal cavity, considered to be upper respiratory tract, and trachea, bronchi, and lungs are lower respiratory tract. All the way down to bronchi, all the way down to terminal bronchioles, it is a conducting zone of the respiratory system, a part of respiratory system that brings gases into the lungs. Starting at the respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts, and alveoli, that's a respiratory zone of respiratory system. This is the part of respiratory system that is essential for the gas exchange. So we will try to figure out the general anatomy of the respiratory system. Paranasal sinuses. Sinuses are structures that light up our skull and resonate the sound that we produce when we speak. So here you can see a frontal sinus and the sphenoid sinus. Nostrils are here, external nares. Nasal conchae or inferior nasal conchae, nasal turbinates, increase the surface area of your nasal cavity. And here you can see pharynx, nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. Now let's switch to the marker once again, and we'll talk about epiglottis, larynx, and trachea. You can see epiglottis on practically every picture here, so that's epiglottis. And this will be epiglottis to this box here, so larynx, as well as this one. Here, larynx and trachea are clearly seen on this model. Trachea is not that obvious on either of those pictures. Now let's look at the lungs. So lungs, left, right, and left, have three lobes. Superior in, okay, I'm going a second. Superior lobe of the left lung and superior lobe of the right lung. Sorry, superior lobe of the right and superior on the left. Middle lobe in the right, and inferior lobes of the right and left. This depression here is called a cardiac notch. So left lung is smaller than the right. Diaphragm muscle is essential for expanding and contracting your chest for breathing. Intercostal muscles can be found between the ribs. And finally, bronchi. Bronchi are easier to look at in this image. So primary, secondary, and tertiary colored bronchi or segmental bronchi. So primary or main bronchi supply the air into the lungs, left and right. Secondary bronchi deliver the air into the lobes of the lungs, and segmental bronchi deliver the air to bronchopulmonary segments. So left and right lung. This is the right lung. This is left. We can tell them apart because left lung has a cardiac notch to accommodate heart. Diaphragm muscle is here. Trachea can be seen here, and those are primary bronchi. Trachea is anterior in front of esophagus. So esophagus is exactly behind the trachea. Now frontal sinus, nasal conchae, and epiglottis are here. That's epiglottis. Function of epiglottis is to close the larynx and trachea when you swallow, to prevent food from being aspirated into the lungs. So here's epiglottis, trachea, larynx, and bronchi. Primary, lobar, and then you can see segmental bronchi. So if you would look at the larynx and trachea, you will see the rings of the cartilage. These rings prevent larynx and trachea from collapsing, providing a patent airway for the air to get to the lungs. Gas exchange occurs in two locations. One, external respiration, occurs in the lungs, where CO2 goes from the blood in pulmonary capillaries into the alveoli to be exhaled, and oxygen diffuses from alveoli into the pulmonary capillaries to be delivered to the left side of the heart and then to the rest of the tissues. In the tissues, during the process of internal respiration, oxygen diffuses from the blood to the cells of the body, while carbon dioxide produced during cellular metabolism diffuses from the cells into the systemic capillaries and is taken away to the right side of the lungs, to the right side of the heart, and eventually to the lungs to be exhaled. Histologically, if you would look at alveoli, they mainly consist of, they are covered with simple squamous epithelium. You can see the walls of alveoli. So cells are squamous, and epithelium has a simple arrangement. This simple squamous epithelium is very thin and provides a good passage for diffusion of respiratory gases in and out of alveoli. This thin barrier facilitates diffusion very well. So, in order to have normal, efficient respiration, millions of alveoli provide an enormous surface area for the successful gas exchange between the inhaled air and the pulmonary capillaries. Now here you can see the epithelium that lines trachea. You can see pseudo-stratified, what seems to be multiple layers of cells, which in fact is one, and cells are columnar in shape. So trachea is lined with a ciliated, pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. These cilia are essential for moving whatever's outside of them in a specific direction. In this case, mucus. As you can see, individuals that suffer from ciliary dyskinesia cannot move the mucus. Therefore, mucus accumulates in the trachea. Mucus traps all the pathogens, but without moving it upstream towards the pharynx to be swallowed, those accumulated pathogens in the mucus will cause respiratory infections. So this is cilia, as I mentioned, and it moves mucus from the trachea upstream towards the pharynx. Now we can't really listen to the lung sounds. They are extremely important to understand what's going on with the respiratory system. For instance, wheezing is a sound that is often produced during asthma attack. Okay. Stethoscope allows you to listen to the lungs on different positions between different ribs, so you can assess the function of the different parts of the lung. Now, the effects of carbon dioxide. So how exhaled air will affect the pH of distilled water? In fact, exhaled air contains CO2, the acidic gas. So we're going to have two solutions of bromthiamyl blue, hypothetically. One will serve as a control, and another will receive CO2 that we exhale. So we would otherwise exhale through the straw into the cup covered with a saran wrap, thus accumulating CO2 in the cup. And no wonder that initially both cups were blue and control cup remained blue, but exhaled air cup turned yellow. So exhaled air reduced pH of distilled water, made it more acidic. So our initial hypothesis that exhaled air is acidic was supported. When CO2 combines with water, it produces a molecule of carbonic acid, H2CO3. Now, if we would use not the water but buffered solution, pH would probably not change. We could test this hypothesis by using buffered solution. For example, phosphate buffer or trace buffer, and exhale into it. Potential sources of air are multiple, different volume of exhaled air between different people, different intensity of exhalation, different concentrations of variations in the concentrations of bromphenol blue, variations in the volume of the solution, all of it. We could improve that experiment to make it more quantitative. Now we're going to talk about respiratory volumes. So there are some. This is the tidal volume. That's the volume of normal respiration. Everything that you can inspire on top of your normal tidal inspiration is inspiratory reserve volume. Everything that you can expire after you normally expire your tidal volume, it's expiratory reserve volume, and there's a residual volume that stays in your lung no matter what. Now, tidal volume and inspiratory reserve volume is your inspiratory capacity. How much air you can inhale after the normal expiration. The total volume of your lungs is total lung volume. Vital capacity. It's basically when you inhale as much as you can and then exhale as much as you can. That exhalation shows you your vital capacity. And functional residual volume is the volume in your lungs that remains after your normal tidal exhalation or expiration. Now, we won't be able to measure the volumes using spirometry, obviously. So usually females have, just due to the smaller body size, they have smaller respiratory volumes. Now, since we are using the spirometer isn't the great tool. So if we would have electronic spirometer, for instance, so we take several measurements, that would definitely improve the results and make, collect measurements from various different people. So respiratory disorder that affects person's lung function or respiratory volumes, asthma, emphysema, generally chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Because there's less capacity for gas exchange and lungs have to be inflated more, for instance. So we're going to talk about some of the disorders now. So fawn, heavy smoker, okay, quitting, yeah, whatever. So shortness of breath, chronic coughing, and pulmonologists did pulmonary auscultation. Vital capacity was low, total lung capacity was abnormally high. So turns out many of her alveoli were destroyed. Okay, so the alveolar surface reduced, which means less efficient gas exchange, and those are all the signs of emphysema. Vital capacity is low because she cannot, inhale. She cannot exchange gas with the atmosphere. But total lung capacity, because she had to expand her lungs just to breathe, total lung capacity was abnormally high. So we just explained this. Fawn had to expand her lungs so much to provide proper gas exchange that her lungs became much larger. There are no treatment options really. Lung transplant. So here, Dave in the middle of sprints. Dave dropped to knees, gasped for air, chest pain, incessant coughing, wheezing. That's exercise-induced asthma. Wheezing because Dave's bronchi constricted and air struggled to get in and out of his lungs. Treatment options: a muscle spasm and inflammation, myorelaxants, and anti-inflammatory drugs. So you can use Ventolin as myorelaxant and steroids as the treatment for inflammation. Michael, so car accident, chest slammed, sharp pain, broken rib perforates the lung, leading to so-called pneumothorax. And that's not really disorder, it's just pneumothorax. Option, reduction of the broken rib, and then reinflation, sucking the air out of the pleural cavity. Okay. Michael's heart is here. Ribs. You can kind of see here ribs. Vertebrae. Lung. That's going to be that's going to be left lung because that's vertebrae. That's going to be left lung, I'm sorry, that's going to be right lung. Is that? Oh, that's inferior view, sorry. So that is Michael's right lung, and that is Michael's left lung. Okay. Landmarks help distinguish the left and right side of the body, vertebrae in the back, and heart being, shifted to the left. So, epiglottis, trachea, left lung on the diagram. Epiglottis, trachea, left lung. Structure number 1, well, that's epiglottis, essentially. Sequence. So we have pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli. That is the proper sequence. Carbon dioxide isn't toxic to the cells, but it reduces the pH in the cells, which leads to denaturation of proteins and nucleic acids and basically stops cells from functioning. Walls of alveoli are composed of simple squamous epithelium. Pneumothorax is the medical term for a collapsed lung. Pulmonary auscultation is listening to the lungs with a stethoscope. B is a tidal volume. Spirometry is performed on patients to assess their lung function. The difference between vital capacity and residual volume. Vital capacity is the volume that a patient can basically operate. Can inhale, exhale, so it's a forced exhalation from the top of inhalation. Residual volume is the volume of air in the lungs that is out of control for a patient. Exchange between inhaled air and blood is external respiration.